So a contingency table is a table that shows the distribution of one variable in rows and of another in columns. And it is used to represent two-way classification. So what is meant by a two-way classification? A two-way classification is when two categorical observations are obtained from a sampling unit. So it means that each observation in a contingency table, that observation represents two variables at a time, right? So this is meant by a two-way classification. So a contingency table has several rows and columns in it, and this is referred to as R by C contingency table, where R represents the number of rows and C represents the number of columns. And the simplest type of the contingency table is a 2 by 2 contingency table. So 2 by 2 contingency table has 2 rows and 2 columns. So it means that each of the two variables has 2 nominal categories, but it can have more than 2 nominal categories. So this is a contingency table. So now we are going to take the examples of the contingency tables to understand the properties of the contingency table. So remember these two aspects of the contingency table: the two-way classification, which is presented by the blue color, and the other aspect is 2 or more than 2 nominal categories, which is presented by the green number. So here we have the contingency table that we were talking about. So this is a 2 by 2 contingency table, and in this table you can see that there are two variables. One variable is presented in rows and the other variable is presented in columns. So the variable which is presented in rows is the type of soil, and it has two nominal categories, the clay soil and chalk soil. And the variable which is presented in columns is the type of species, and it also has two categories, Oniscus and Armadillidium. So that is why it is a 2 by 2 contingency table, because each of the variable has two nominal categories. So number 25 here, the cell which contains the observation 25. So this 25 is the number of Oniscus in clay soil. So this number 25 is a two-way classification because it represents two variables at a time. And then the number 20, so this is Oniscus in chalk soil. And then number 8, it represents Armadillidium in clay soil, and number 23 represents Armadillidium in chalk soil. So this is what is meant by a two-way classification, that each of these observations, each of these cells in a contingency table, they represent two variables. And why it is a 2 by 2 contingency table? It is 2 by 2 contingency table because each of the variables has two nominal categories. Now, one-way classification for the same example. So what is a one-way classification? In which only one variable is given. So this is the same example, and we are presenting a one-way classification of this example, that the type of species, Oniscus and Armadillidium. So you can see that there is only one variable, and this is why it is a one-way classification. So a contingency table has a two-way classification in which there are two variables, but a simple one-way classification is that in which there is only one variable. Now let's take another example to understand the concept of the two-way classification and a contingency table. So this is a one-way classification in which the weight of students is measured, and there are 6 classes of the range of the weight of students. And then there are frequencies, that the number of students having a weight between 41 and 50 kilograms, and then 26 is the number of students having weight between 51 and 60 kilograms, and so on. So what if we add another variable? Because this table has got only one variable, and that variable is the weight of students. So what if we add another variable to this classification? So it will become a two-way classification. And if we add another variable, which is the gender of students. So now we have two variables, which is the gender of students, which is presented in columns, and it has two categories, females and males. And then the other variable is the weight of students in kilograms, which is presented in rows, and it has 6 classes or 6 categories. And the observations, they belong to two variables, the gender of students and the weight of students. So number 10 here are the females with a weight in the range of 41 to 50 kilograms. 14 are the females with a weight range of 51 to 60 kilograms, and so on. So this is a two-way classification, and this is meant by this is what is meant by the contingency table. And a contingency table is not simply a 2 by 2 table, but it can have more than 2 categories. Taking other examples of the contingency table, so here we have a 2 by 4 contingency table. So in this 2 by 4 contingency table, you can see that there are 2 rows and there are 4 columns. So what are the 2 rows? These 2 rows, they represent the diet recommended by the American Heart Association, and the diet which is Mediterranean. And then in the columns, we have the health status of individuals, the cancer cases, non-fatal heart disease cases, fatal heart disease cases, and healthy individuals. So this is a 2 by 4. So diet is presented in rows, and the other variable, which is the health status, it is presented in columns. So 15, this observation or this cell, it represents the number of cancer cases on American Heart Association recommended diet. And 7 represents the number of cancer cases using the Mediterranean diet. 24 is the number of the non-fatal heart disease cases on AHA diet, and 14 is the number of non-fatal heart disease cases on Mediterranean diet. Then 25 is the number of fatal heart disease cases on AHA diet, and number 8 is the number of fatal heart disease on Mediterranean diet. Then 239 are the number of healthy individuals on AHA diet, and 273 is the number of healthy individuals on Mediterranean diet. So this contingency table has 2 variables, the diet and the health status. And one variable is presented in rows and the other variable is presented in columns. So this is a 2 by 4 contingency table. Why it is a 2 by 4 contingency table? Because the rows, they have 2 categories, and the columns, they have 4 categories. So that is why this is a 2 by 4 contingency table. And now we have another example, which is a 3 by 3 contingency table. And in this table, you can see that again, the 2 variables, they have 3 nominal categories each. One variable is presented in rows, and that variable is the pH of water. And one variable is presented in columns, which is the species of protists which are found in that water. So this is 3 by 3. So there are 2 variables, the species and the pH. And the pH has 3 categories, and the species also has 3 categories. So this is a 3 by 3 contingency table. So 16 here represents the number of Urotricha castalia in the pH of 5 to 7. 24 is the number of Urotricha castalia in the pH of 7 to 9. And 11 is the number of Urotricha castalia in the pH of 9 to 11. And then 37 is the number of Chlamydomonas acidophila in the pH of 5 to 7. 22 is the number of Chlamydomonas acidophila in the pH of 7 to 9. And 8 is the number of Chlamydomonas acidophila in the pH of 9 to 11. And then we have our last column, which is the Cryptomonas curvata. So 16 is the number, which is the number of Cryptomonas curvata in the pH of range 5 to 7. 25 is the number of Cryptomonas curvata in the pH range of 7 to 9. And 12 is the number of Cryptomonas curvata which are found in the water with a pH in the range of 9 to 11. So these are the contingency tables. So a contingency table has a 2-way classification system in which each observation represents 2 variables at a time. And a contingency table can have, it can be simple, it can be 2 by 2, or it can have more than 2 nominal categories. It could be 2 by 4, it could be 3 by 3, it could be 4 by 4, it could be 4 by 6, 4 by 5, or 5 by 4. So this is the concept of contingency table.